Now, we were up 20 at some point in the second quarter, I believe. I want to say it was 46-26, something along those lines. Seattle Storm fight.
When the final buzzer echoed through the building in Seattle, the box score told a story that left even the most stubborn critics with absolutely nowhere to hide. 32 points, 7 assists, 9 rebounds, and an absolute masterclass in offensive pacing that shattered one of the top defensive schemes in the entire league. This wasn't just another impressive statistical outing on a random Tuesday night. This was a thunderous, unmistakable statement sent directly to every coach, analyst, and skeptic who believed they had cracked the code on stopping Caitlin Clark. For months, the dominant talking point across sports media was built around the brutal learning curve of professional basketball, the steep physical adjustment from college to the pros, and the overwhelming pressure resting on a rookie's shoulders. But on this night, against a veteran Seattle Storm team loaded with elite defenders, every single narrative was torn to shreds. Every pull-up jumper from deep logo range, every laser pass threaded through 3 defenders, and every step-back dagger in transition proved one undeniable fact. The game wasn't changing her. She was single-handedly forcing the entire league to change the way basketball is played. To truly understand the weight of this moment, you have to go back to the beginning of the season, when the skepticism surrounding Clark reached a boiling point. When she stepped onto a professional court for the first time, veteran coaches were openly confident that their defensive systems would neutralize her signature game. Among those watching with a sharp, critical eye was Stephanie White, head coach of the Connecticut Sun and one of the most respected defensive tacticians in basketball history. White, having spent years as both an elite player and a sharp-minded broadcaster before leading one of the most suffocating defensive teams in the 1BA, understood the brutal transition rookies face. In the early weeks of the schedule, teams threw everything imaginable at Clark. They picked her up full court from the moment she tied her shoes, slapped her with physical bump-and-grind defense off the ball, and trapped her relentlessly on every high pick and roll. Early on, the turnover numbers were high, the physical bumps left bruises, and critics pounced on every mistake as proof that her collegiate brilliance wouldn't translate to the ultimate level. During those first 15 games, the public discourse around Clark fractured into 2 distinct camps. On one side was a wave of legacy commentators and media figures who insisted that her style was unsustainable against professional athletes. Famous quotes floated around television studios, warning that reality was coming for the rookie, while former legends publicly downplayed her record-breaking accomplishments. The physical treatment on the court reached levels rarely seen for an incoming guard, sparking intense national debates about officiating, hard fouls, and whether veteran players were deliberately pushing the envelope. Off the court, the pressure was immense. Every arena was sold out, every movement was scrutinized, and every single shot attempt carried the weight of millions of tuning eyes. Yet, behind closed doors, analytical minds like Stephanie White weren't distracted by the social media noise. They were watching the film, examining the spatial geometry, and noticing something far more concerning for the rest of the league. Despite the physical beatings and double teams, Clark wasn't slowing down. She was adapting at a rate that defied standard basketball development. By the time the Indiana Fever arrived in Seattle to face the Storm, that adaptation was fully complete. Seattle came into the game with a defensive identity built on length, athleticism, and relentless perimeter pressure. With multi-time All-Stars and perimeter lockdown defenders like Skylar Diggins-Smith and Jewel Lloyd, Seattle's game plan was clear from the opening tip. Take away Clark's space, force her to turn her back, and make her give up the basketball. But within minutes of the opening jump, Seattle realized their game plan was completely useless. When Seattle's guards pressed high to deny her shot, Clark used her quick burst to split the double team and hit open teammates with jaw-dropping pocket passes. When Seattle attempted to drop their bigs into the paint to protect the rim, Clark stepped back and buried 30-foot jumpers that made the arena gasp. By the second half, Seattle's head coach was desperately swapping defensive looks, switching from high traps to full-court pressure, to zone, and back to man-to-man. Yet nothing worked. Clark manipulated every defensive rotation like a grandmaster playing chess against amateurs, finishing with 32 explosive points and orchestrating the entire floor. Watching this performance unfold left Stephanie White with no choice but to break her silence and deliver an unfiltered, candid evaluation of what Clark had actually become. In a series of breakdown analyses that caught the attention of the entire basketball world, White laid out the tactical truth. White admitted that early in the season, coaches believed you could disrupt Clark by being overly physical and taking away her primary reads. But what White pointed out after the Seattle game was a terrifying reality for opposing coaching staffs. Clark's basketball IQ and processing speed had jumped to an elite level far faster than anyone anticipated. White noted that standard scouting reports are completely useless against a player who can execute 30-foot pull-ups off the bounce, because it forces defensive bigs to stand far outside their comfort zone, leaving the paint completely wide open for secondary scorers. White openly admitted that Clark's passing gravity, the threat of her vision alone, forces defense after defense into impossible dilemmas, where every single choice results in giving up an open bucket. This direct admission from Stephanie White sent shockwaves through league circles, because White is not someone who gives out cheap praise. As the architect of one of the league's most terrifying defensive franchises, her perspective carried massive weight. White pointed out that what makes Clark so dangerous isn't just her long-range scoring capacity, it's her unique ability to process help-side defense in real time. When Seattle tried to double-team her 30 feet from the rim, Clark didn't panic or force bad passes. She picked the exact microsecond when the help defender committed, whipping crisp cross-court passes directly into the hands of open shooters. White emphasized that when a young guard forces seasoned defensive coaches to throw out their entire game plan by the middle of the second quarter, you are no longer dealing with a promising young athlete. You are dealing with a generational offensive system disguised as a single player. The breakdown by White illuminated the unspoken friction that has been brewing inside locker rooms across the country all year long. For decades, the league maintained a strict, unspoken code where young players were required to suffer through years of physical initiation before earning respect. But Clark's arrival completely disrupted that old-school order. Not only did she enter the league with unprecedented commercial power, sold-out arenas, and charter flight upgrades, but her style of play directly challenged the traditional physical, mid-range heavy style that older veterans had built their careers on. Reports and rumors of targeted physicality, aggressive bench chatter, and passive-aggressive post-game comments were signs of a league coming to grips with a seismic shift. Veteran guards who were used to dictating terms were suddenly getting dragged into continuous high-screen traps 30 feet out, breathing heavily as Clark pushed the transition pace to speeds the league had rarely seen before. The Seattle game served as the definitive tipping point, where excuses finally ran out. For months, critics pointed to poor shooting nights or early turnover sprees as evidence that the rookie hype was inflated. But dropping 32 points and 7 assists on a championship-caliber roster, while being face-guarded and trapped for 40 straight minutes, proved that those early struggles were merely calibration periods. What critics failed to realize was that Clark was absorbing data with every hit, every trap, and every missed shot. Instead of backing down from the physical enforcement, she used it to refine her footwork, improve her drawing of defensive fouls, and speed up her release. The Seattle defense, designed to intimidate and frustrate, was dismantled so thoroughly that it felt like a warning shot to the remaining franchises on the schedule. Beyond the scoring numbers, it was the sheer mental dominance that shook analysts to their core. In the fourth quarter against Seattle, with the game hanging in the balance, Clark didn't just score. she systematically broke the spirit of her opponents. After drawing a double team on 3 consecutive possessions and finding open teammates for easy scores, Seattle was forced to play her straight up on a crucial island possession. Standing near the midcourt logo, Clark used a subtle crossover, created 3 inches of space with a step back, and hoisted a shot that touched nothing but net. The Seattle bench sat in total disbelief, while the crowd, even on the road, erupted into sheer awe. That single play summarized the entire nightmare opposing coaches face when trying to build a defensive strategy against her. If you double her, she kills you with her vision. If you leave her one-on-one, she kills you with her range. The ripple effects of Stephanie White's assessment and Clark's continuous dominance are already reshaping the future of women's basketball. Coaching staffs across the league are now spending off days entirely focused on building new defensive philosophies, specifically designed to handle long-range spacing and hyper-fast transition play. The traditional defensive setups that dominated the league for the last 2 decades are rapidly becoming obsolete against an offense that operates from 30 feet out. Young guards coming up through the ranks are studying Clark's footwork, her court vision, and her rapid decision-making, realizing that the standard requirements for elite play have been altered permanently. The league is undergoing a massive evolutionary leap, and it is happening at a pace that has left traditionalists scrambling to keep up. When you look back at all the noise, controversy, and skepticism that framed the beginning of this journey, the outcome feels almost inevitable. The physical welcome to the league moments didn't break her confidence. They accelerated her transformation into an unstoppable force. The public critiques from former players didn't diminish her impact. They only highlighted how revolutionary her game truly is compared to past generations. And as coaches like Stephanie White step forward to publicly credit her greatness, the narrative has shifted forever, from whether Caitlin Clark can survive in this league to whether the rest of the league can survive what she is building. The 32-point, 7-assist demolition of Seattle wasn't the peak of her journey. It was merely the announcement that the new era has officially arrived, and there is absolutely nothing anyone can do to stop it. To fully grasp how massive this tactical shift is, you have to look closely at how standard defensive philosophies in professional basketball are actually built. For decades, head coaches designed their perimeter defenses around specific geometric principles. You force ball handlers toward the sidelines, you sink your help side defenders into the paint to protect the rim, and you contest shots at the three-point line with late rotations. But when Caitlin Clark pulls up from 32 feet without hesitation, those classic geometric principles completely collapse. Defensive coaches cannot keep their rim protectors near the basket when the high pick-and-roll starts near the mid-court logo. If the defensive center drops back even 2 steps to guard against the drive, Clark launches a shot before the defender can even raise their hands. If the center steps up to hedge 30 feet away from the basket, it leaves 40 feet of wide-open space behind them, allowing rollers to glide in for uncontested layups or easy kick-out passes to the corners. Stephanie White recognized this exact dilemma when analyzing film of the Indiana Fever's offensive evolution. During her time studying film, White pointed out that traditional hedging strategies rely on speed and defensive recovery. Against average perimeter shooters, a defender has time to hedge out, contain the ball handler, and recover back to their original assignment while the ball is in the air. But Clark's release is so fast, and her passing velocity is so high, that recovery defense becomes physically impossible. When Seattle tried to execute a hard hedge against her, Clark punished them instantly by slinging passes with one hand across the floor, before the help defender could even plant their feet. This single tactical element forced Seattle's entire defense to play in a state of constant recovery, creating massive defensive fatigue that showed clearly in the second half of the game. This realization explains why so many opposing players and coaches have appeared visibly frustrated on the court when facing her. It isn't just about losing a game. It is about feeling completely helpless when your best defensive efforts are systematically torn apart. In early matchups, veteran guards used aggressive physical contact as a mental tactic to throw Clark off her rhythm. They bumped her at half court, jabbed at the ball after the whistle, and delivered hard fouls on drives to the basket. But as the season progressed, Clark stopped reacting to the physical provocation and started using it against her opponents. She began using defenders' aggressive momentum against them, utilizing subtle hesitation moves and sidesteps to draw defensive fouls, while putting opposing key players into deep foul trouble early in the game. The psychological impact of this adaptation cannot be overstated. When defenders realize that being physical no longer disrupts a star player's focus, they lose their ultimate safety net. In the matchup against the Seattle Storm, defenders tried to get up inside her space from the moment she touched the ball. Instead of backing away, Clark repeatedly used quick crossover moves to blow past tight coverage, collapsing Seattle's entire interior defense before throwing behind-the-back passes to open shooters. The body language of the Seattle defense in the fourth quarter said everything that needed to be said. Hands were on hips. Defenders were looking at their bench for answers that weren't coming, and the intensity that defined their early defensive presence completely evaporated. The drama surrounding Clark's rookie season extended far beyond tactical film studies, reaching deep into the socio-cultural fabric of modern sports entertainment. Media networks saw record-shattering television ratings whenever she played, with viewership numbers surpassing traditional major league events across multiple platforms. Arena ticket prices skyrocketed. Away venues reported historical merchandise sales, and fan bases turned out in droves just to watch pre-game warm-up routines. Yet, this incredible rise was accompanied by an unprecedented level of external media friction. Hot-take television hosts debated her every word. Former players expressed frustration at the intense spotlight focused on a single player, and online platforms became digital battlegrounds between longtime fans and new followers entering the ecosystem for the first time. Throughout this relentless storm of attention, Clark maintained an intense, laser-like focus on the court that kept her basketball output completely separate from the surrounding noise. When asked about controversial fouls, media debates, or commentary from legends of previous eras, her responses remained strictly centered on team growth, game execution, and performance adjustments. This professional maturity off the court matched her rapid evolution on the court, frustrating critics who were waiting for an emotional breakdown under the intense microscope. Her ability to tune out external chaos and consistently deliver 30-point performances against elite defensive competition proved that her mental toughness was just as refined as her physical skill set. The endorsement from Stephanie White carried extra significance because White represents the ultimate modern basketball mindset, a blend of old-school grit and advanced analytical strategy. White spent years building a team culture in Connecticut, centered on defensive physical dominance, holding opponents to league-low scoring averages, and prioritizing defensive accountability above all else. For a head coach with those exact values, to step forward and praise Clark's offensive genius was a massive turning point in how the league views the rookie. White did not just acknowledge Clark's talent, she framed her as a league-wide puzzle that demands an entirely new defensive strategy from every coaching staff in professional basketball. As the season moves toward its grand conclusion, the conversations surrounding Rookie of the Year have quietly shifted into discussions about All-NBA First Team and MVP consideration. Statistical benchmarks that stood untouched for decades are being rewritten week after week, with Clark racking up record-breaking assist totals, historic rookie scoring marks, and triple-double performances that no rookie guard in history had ever achieved. The Seattle game, featuring 32 32 points and 7 assists, was not an isolated outlier. It was part of a continuous streak of historic play that elevated her team from the bottom of the standings directly into playoff contention. The broader impact on the WNBA's global footprint is already altering the long-term financial structure of the sport. Expansion teams are being finalized, corporate sponsorships are pouring in at record levels, and arena infrastructure is being upgraded to accommodate massive crowds that show no signs of slowing down. Veteran players across every franchise are experiencing the benefits of this financial tide, with charter flights now fully implemented league-wide, a direct result of the elevated public interest and player safety